Hello everyone, Phreak here, and it's time for part 3 of my Runes Reforged series, I guess it is now, where we're going to be going over the Domination path in Runes Reforged in the 2018 preseason. For those who don't know me, I am a Diamond level bot lane main, a commentator for the North American Pro League, and an aficionado of math and theory crafting, so I really love digging into Runes Reforged. So let's talk about them. And we're going to be talking about, once again, the Domination path. I called it Tree in the last video. That makes me kind of silly. Life is pain. Oh well. Alright, so Domination, when you choose it as your primary path, it gives you 11 attack damage or 18 ability power. Notably, it is less than you get by being a sorcery main. However, both Domination and Sorcery give you the same amount of stats, which I believe is... I'm going to get the numbers wrong, so I'm not going to bother saying it. I think it's like 16 AD and 28 AP if it's a secondary for Inspiration. Which means basically if you only like 2 of the slots here and you don't really want a keystone, you can heavily amplify the AP and AD you get by being an Inspiration primary. That's not the point of this video though, let's move on. So let's talk about Domination and its 3 keystones. Electrocute, which is hitting a champion with 3 separate attacks or abilities, deals bonus damage. Predator, which basically lets you turn on a Warwick W by channeling it out of combat. And Dark Harvest, which gives you a bunch of bonus damage once in a while. So I'm going to start with Dark Harvest. Dark Harvest, I think, I'm going to guess maybe half the champions is the optimal keystone in ARAM because siege minions and champions die a lot in ARAM, and it's actually pretty easy to apply an auto attack in these cases. Souls end up carrying quite a bit here. This is not important for everyone, it's only ARAM, but it's really, really easy to trigger. It does mean you have to go into Domination as, you know, your 3 next runes, but honestly, Dark Harvest is pretty insane. And in fact, just for what it's worth, Dark Harvest Domination into Precision with Triumph and Coup de Grace is basically good on every champion in ARAM. There are alternatives out there, but almost everyone can run that and feel good, so FYI, good ARAM page. But honestly, right now, I feel like Dark Harvest is in a pretty weak state. There are some uses of it. Apparently, Kha'Zix seems to be doing pretty well based on statistics early on. Theoretically, you could hope that Gangplank could make it work by picking up souls and throwing Qs out at people, but it's more of a snowball-y rune. Like, this rune works well when you get into a team fight and you get that first kill and you keep going, but that's not always a really strong case. Like, if you contrast it to things like Press the Attack, which also applies by auto-attacking people, because Dark Harvest applies on auto-attacks, not on spells, keep that in mind, unless I'm misreading, but it's attacks, so just double-checking that. Basically, if you're someone who's going to apply Dark Harvest to, like, keep his team fight going, you're probably someone who would be using Electrocute or using Press the Attack for very similar reasons. So it's hard to find the right target for Dark Harvest. Again, Kha'Zix being decent at this. I would like to see, you know, Kindred be able to do this a little bit as well because theoretically they can land the basic attacks coming out of the jungle, whatnot. One of the important points to think about is Soul Charge only lasts 20 seconds, but it increases to 300 once you get to 150 Soul Essence. 150 takes kind of a while, so it's hard to get that 5-minute duration to actually bring it over to a turret or a champion. But in a world where Dark Harvest is balanced, then again, I do think it's probably on the weak side because there aren't a lot of good users of Dark Harvest. If it, you know, were probably balanced, then I think you start seeing it be really, really good on, you know, resetting assassins who want to apply the damage to more than one champion. Kha'Zix, of course, again, being a primary user here, you know, a consideration for Kindred, although Kindred would probably rather have the bonus attack speed from being a precision primary. So I'm just not sure. Maybe Graves can make use out of this at some point, but I haven't really played any Graves, so I couldn't tell you. Honestly, what it comes down to is I find it hard finding the right customer for Dark Harvest. Predator is very interesting. Predator, I think, is a super fun rune. Basically, it gives you you channel for a little bit, much like if any of you have used Edge of Night, you channel. You could still move, but if you take damage and stuff, it stops. It goes on cooldown and whatnot. Basically, you just get a pretty big movement speed boost. It's 45% for 15 seconds. Everyone gets a global warning. You all get a little like mark above your head that Predator's been activated, and it deals some damage. It's not a ton, but Predator I think is really, 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 really good on champions who are not normally good at ganking but want to gank well. So pre-6 Nocturne can suddenly gank with Predator. You can talk about a Maokai getting into lane to land the gank, or a Nautilus, but champions who have reliable tools but can't get in range to use the reliable tools, well, Predator gets there for you because the movement speed doesn't scale. It starts at 45% and it lasts a really long time as long as you're out of combat. Sorry, I take that back. It's not out of combat movement speed. You channel for 1.5 out of combat. You gain the movement speed until you deal damage. So they can't even like ping you and turn off Moby Boots or things like Warwick W, which turns off when you get in combat. Predator gets you the movement speed. So again, the primary users here, and even though the rune again looks statistically pretty weak, I think it's more the fact that it's one of the hardest to use keystones in the game. Not number one, but one of the hardest to use keystones in the game. But again, it's super sick for pre-6 ganking, and it's super sick for mid laners who want to roam. I don't think you should run Predator as a bot lane marksman. I don't think you should run Predator in the top lane. I think you can run Predator in the support role if you're going to play like Thresh or Blitzcrank. You recall for Boots 1 or Mobies, and then you walk to like mid lane tier 2, then pop Predator and just walk at Lux until she dies. There's actually some really, really good power here. Predator is a great roam and gank maker. I think this is my expectation, probably one of the very best keystones for those roles, mid jungle support, in pro play. And I think in high level solo queue, like Diamond Plus, I think we start to see it as well. Over time, people will learn how this works. People will certainly, some of this is suppressed by the fact that like Sona was overpowered for the first week, so why play Blitz when you can play Sona and Nami and Lulu and just abuse the fact that Aerie is insanely overpowered in 722. But once other keystones stop being super broken, you can start seeing things like this pop up. But it's no surprise right now that like the best supports are all Aerie users, which means Predator, Blitzcrank just can't win because you can't survive Aerie Sona, I think Predator is super sick, though. And again, on those rolls, I think it's bonkers good. Electrocute is almost exactly what you expect Thunderlord's Decree to be. Worth pointing out, the damage is roughly doubled in all cases for Electrocute. The base damage is now 50 to 220 instead of 10 to 180. The ratios are both plus 0.2, I think. It's plus 0.1 or plus 0.2 compared to old Thunderlords, and the cooldown is roughly doubled, not exactly, but roughly doubled compared to old Thunderlords as well. So the damage is roughly doubled, the cooldown is roughly doubled, and it's slightly harder to trigger because, for example, a Zyra plant attacking twice will not contribute 2 stacks, it will only contribute 1 stack. So it is harder to trigger, but when it triggers, it's very good. A champion like Echo is very good at triggering Electrocute, for example, because you're gonna, jump on them with E, you're gonna land your Q, and you're gonna auto them again, like almost for sure. And so you get a big extra chunk of damage out of this. I think Echo could also conceivably use Dark Harvest for the similar reasons, because he does want to get in there and land auto attacks. And just to jump back to Dark Harvest a little bit, or even Electrocute, in any of these cases, these are keystones where the damage is pretty heavily front-loaded into the actual level incentive. So you look at Dark Harvest, it's 80 bonus damage, right, at max level. 0.25 bonus AD means if you have, like, literally 200 bonus attack damage, which is obscenely high, though reachable, it only adds 50. And consider that you're probably going to be getting, like, 150, 200 or so Soul Essence, which means the base damage is 280. And you can add 50 with obnoxious attack damage. That's not a very big ratio increase. You look at something like Predator. Well, the primary power is in the movement speed by itself. Yes, okay, you can actually bump the damage a lot with your 0.4 bonus AD ratio, but most of the power is in just the flat value of the keystone. You look at Electrocute, and again, 220 base damage. With 200 bonus AD, you can bump it by, I guess, 100, which at that point is pretty good. So Electrocute actually does scale a fair bit off of actual raw attack damage. But at a point where you have 200 attack damage, you do a lot of damage anyway. I'm kind of rambling on about this a little bit, but basically the way I view these keystones is they're not actually required to be on assassins and burst mages and whatnot. I think you can actually get away with Electrocute pretty reliably on Braum and Thresh. Maybe not Electrocute so much. Of course, we talked about Predator before, but that's where I feel like the market really is for things like this. But yeah, Electrocute, obviously, to sum it up, obviously very, very good on Assassins. It is by far the most burst damage you can get in a Keystone rune, period. That is its job. Electrocute is the most burst, period. It is. It just is. It's the most burst. And so if your job is to burst one target, it's there. It will not turn on again in the team fight compared to something like Dark Harvest might, or even Comet or Summon Airy, but that's fine. If you want to burst one person, it will do that, and it's a lot of damage. In fact, just to continue and add one more point on Electrocute, it is even more important to trigger Electrocute in your laning phase harass pattern than before because the damage is so much higher, right? Level 1 Electrocute does 50 damage when level 1 Thunderlords did 10. There's a substantial damage increase by landing this on time. Okay, anyway, I think Predator is super cool. Talk about the first slot under the Keystone runes: Cheapshot, Taste of Blood, and Sudden Impact. Cheapshot, I think, I don't think it's underrated. I think it's as good as people expect. I want to really point out this bottom line of text right here. Activates on damage occurring after the impairment. I also want to point out that Cheapshot just says damaging champions, which means even things like Teemo's E-Poison is gonna trigger on Cheapshot. You obviously have to land the Q first to blind them, but yes, impaired actions would include blinds and silences. But it's like, you think about someone like Kassadin. Well, Kassadin can only trigger this in the 1 second someone's slowed. Teemo has that 1.5 to 2.5 second window of his Q, obviously the mushroom as well. And of course the mushroom, by the way, hit confirms Cheapshot because they're slowed and then take another damage tick from Cheapshot. If you're able to grab something like Arcane Comet alongside Cheapshot or summon Airy alongside Cheapshot, then landing a slowing ability, then summons Airy out there, Airy deals damage, triggers Cheapshot. So there's actually some really nice inbuilt synergies here. Anything at all can trigger Cheapshot once it's actually been applied to a target. You think about Misfortune E, that's going to hit confirm it as well. There's a lot of ways to find free poke with Cheapshot as long as you have some way of dealing follow-up damage. So like a Lux E or a Lux Q won't do it, but a Swain Q will. And I just really want to make sure people realize that you need something else to deal the damage. And the cooldown is so short, you really kind of want to hope that it's the same ability that dealt the slow in the first place. Just to make it so much easier, you know? But Cheapshot is really good, I feel like. I've been playing a lot of Teemo, for example, and using Cheapshot plus Scorch. And Scorch is on any ability hit, it deals like roughly 2 to 3 times what Cheapshot lists right here. About 2 times what Cheapshot lists here. With, of course, a longer cooldown. And Cheapshot generally performs exactly 2 or slightly above Scorch's damage marks because it's easy to apply with Teemo. Really is quite good for just repeated poke as long as you have a way of triggering the damage afterwards. Taste of Blood is actually really good on a lot of champions. It's actually one of the winningest runes in this slot if you're going over there. It's, again, just anytime you damage an enemy champion, it's very easy to trigger. If I weren't so in love with Sorcery Second on Marksman right now, I think Taste of Blood is a really good way to keep Sivir alive in a laning phase because you use Ricochet, and invariably Ricochet will hit someone. It's almost impossible not to hit someone and trigger Taste of Blood. If you're playing something like support Zyra or support Brand, more so Zyra, it's easy to land the poke, but if you're landing a poke support, Sona is a good example of this. That if you land your Q on Sona, not only do you do 60 damage to them, but then you heal for 20 yourself. You add a much larger delta or a much larger difference in power, in total health when you can use this. This is a very, even though it sounds kind of weird, a very good poke rune because you can now look for slightly greedier trades knowing that you're going to heal up by doing so. And every trade, you add 20 health to your side of the ledger. Well, not every, but, you know, up to 3 times a minute, or at least once per wave. It's actually pretty good, and it's honestly pretty reliable because any damage triggers it. So Taste of Blood, again, I think you kind of need to have it on more ranged champions. Like, I wouldn't put it on Riven probably. I mean, obviously you want Sudden Impact on Riven if you go here at all, but, you know, really worth, you know, mentioning that. And some champions, like, even if you could trigger Sudden Impact, you might just want Taste of Blood anyway. It's not too hard to get. I'm thinking of other, you know, good user for this, like Tristan. It's pretty easy to get damage onto people with explosive charge and things like this. If you're playing a champion like Azir, even though, yes, you have dashes on the kit, you have a dash on the kit, if you're going to go into Domination, probably it's a secondary. Taste of Blood is a really good way to heal yourself because you're going to land Qs during landing phase pretty reliably, and you'll heal. Cassiopeia, another great example. But yes, she can trigger Cheapshot with her W all the time. It's not hard whatsoever, and she buys Riley, so she's going to have Cheapshot up really frequently. But just healing yourself in your landing phase is really nice. And I want to point out also one more thing, the numbers on Taste of Blood. You can see it's half of full power at level 1, meaning that this is what you consider an early game rune. And something I want to start bringing up more as we talk about the runes here is there are such things as early game runes. Runes that get most of their power in the first 10 minutes of the game. And they don't scale as well as things like Absolute Focus, or they don't scale as well as things like Transcendence, maybe. They don't scale as well as things like Gathering Storm, the primary example. But they do a lot from the beginning of the game. And so when someone's running, Gathering Storm and Transcendence and Conditioning, these things don't turn on until 10 minutes into the game or 17 minutes into the game. Well, you have a rune that heals you 2 to 3 times a minute for an appreciable amount, right? If you literally trigger Taste of Blood on cooldown forever, you're getting 1 health per second, which is really, really high. It's a significant amount of healing, so I really don't want people to underrate Taste of Blood. Taste of Blood is best in slot on a lot of champions that can use the health in landing phase. I really want to make that clear. Sudden Impact, of course, is the sexy one of the 3. It gives you lethality and Magic Pen if you can land some dashes. I don't think this is worth running on champions that are relying on their ultimates for this. Like, I don't think it's good on Ahri. Obviously, you'd never run this on Cinder because you have no blinks. This could be okay on Vayne, but honestly, you might consider that you just want Taste of Blood on Vayne to survive your landing phase a bit more. Yeah, you have to hit someone to trigger it, but maybe it's just better, or maybe you don't go here at all. But yeah, a Kha'Zix, maybe you consider a Zed, although blinking is not all that, well, yeah, Sudden Impact's probably really good on Zed because it's on for every ultimate. If you ever do blink forward with the W, it's going in there. But I mean, in a lot of these cases, you can get the really obvious examples. I think there is debate whether you want Sudden Impact or Cheap Shot on someone like Kindred, because you're doing kind of similar things, right? I jump in and I get lethality, or I hit E and I do true damage to you. It's probably Sudden Impact, but I think there could be a debate had, just for what it's worth. Anyway, Taste of Blood, I think it's really generally quite good on a lot of things, and it's a great rune overall. Next up, the second slot here below the Keystone, Zombie Ward, Ghost Poro, and Eyeball Collection. So Zombie Ward, after killing a ward of your opponents, a friendly zombie ward is raised in its place. Additionally, when your wards expire, they reanimate as a zombie ward. And while zombie wards are visible, they last for 3 minutes, and they don't count against your other stealth wards. Zombie Ward is actually insane in top lane. And the reason is, even though you're not going to have a really easy time of killing opposing wards, like sometimes you'll get lucky and your control ward finds one, but the fact that if you're playing blue side, right, and you walk up the top lane and you trinket ward their Tri-Brush, okay, they'll last 72 seconds. Congratulations. Okay, well, it timed out. Okay, well, it lasts another 3 minutes now, which means if they don't clear out Tri-Brush, you can permanently ward Tri-Brush forever with Zombie Ward in your trinket. If they clear it out, sure, and maybe at a certain point, good players will realize that you're running Zombie Ward and look to clear that kind of stuff out, but they still have to do it, right? Either the jungler does it and shows himself, which is worth it, because now he showed himself, he's top lane, your team can react to that, or the top laner himself has to do it, which means he has to duck out of lane to kill a Zombie Ward. And yeah, it's probably still the right choice for him to do it, but you've still caused attacks. And imagine as you get lower and lower in ratings, people aren't going to do this at all. I have yet to see someone intentionally get rid of zombie wards in my top lane game so far. This thing is super nice for top lane. And there's a lot of really good uses, just a lot of really good usages just throughout the game. I mean, you're playing mid lane and you drop a zombie ward, you drop your trinket ward, in front of their raptors, like, in front of Red Buff, that little brush by the river, like in front of Baron or in front of the Drake pit, like that little thing in front of Red. Like, people don't walk through that brush a lot. Like, control wards lived there for a long time. Well, you brought your trinket down and now it turns into a 4.5 minute long ward. Congratulations, you can always tell that path. Like this, again, because it's a 3 minute ward that keys off of your 75-second trinket wards, is insanely good. I really, 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 really love Zombie Ward, and almost no one's using it because Eyeball Collector looks sexy and has free stats on it, but this is really actually insane. That everyone who keeps a yellow trinket gets to put down Zombie Wards, and it's just actually incredible. And of course, if you switch to Sweeper, you get to kill a ward and do the same thing. It's actually really incredible. I think Zombie Ward might be best in slot here for a lot of champions. It really is very sexy. Ghost Poro, of course, is another one that's very good. I really like this rune as well. I had initially thought, before I realized that Zombie Ward worked on your own trinket wards, I initially thought that Ghost Poro was better for top lane, because you can walk into their Tri-Brush, drop your Ghost Poro, and then, ward like the river as normal. But then I realized that you can just do that easier with Zombie Ward. Ghost Poro is still good, and one of the primary powers here is the fact that it can go with you, so that you can, like... I know some people have talked about, like, saying, ooh, you know, when you want to counter jungle their raptors, you like run into the raptor brush and then get the Poro spawn and then take raptors. I think that's actually too risky to run into raptor brush without actually already tracking the opposing jungler. And if you're at a point where you're already tracking the opposing jungler, you don't need the Ghost Poro in the brush anymore, right? I think Ghost Poro is best actually leaving it behind you or as an extra ward, right? Ghost Poro is literally an extra ward as long as, you know, you don't unsummon it somewhere silly, but it is an extra ward and can be very, very good for that. Of course, yes, they can destroy zombie ward just like they can destroy Ghost Poro, right? These are disabled in very similar ways. They have to walk into the brush and say, oh, it's a thing, and then it dies. So their counterplay is identical. The question is, what do you want them to actually do for you? And Zombie Ward lets you keep a place on the map warder without you having to face check it, and Ghost Poro lets you dedicatedly put a visible ward somewhere. I think this is probably better on junglers more so. Although it's weird because, like, if you go Zombie Ward and you get Green Smite, which is proper on competitive, you run around and you, like, ward their jungle, and then the wards time out, and then you keep a ward there for another 3 minutes, right? You get 5.5 minute long wards, which is bonkers. So the more I think about the use cases of Ghost Poro, the more I'm like, but why not just take Zombie Ward? It's, like, almost always better. Because Zombie Ward works on every ward you put down. Ghost Poro, you get one. The one upside to Ghost Poro, though, is it's really, really good in level ones. If you're worried about being invaded, everyone can, like, if you have 5 people with Ghost Poro on, right, you get 5 wards all around your jungle, and then you can watch everything. And if you are in a super late game scenario where you've got multiple people running sweepers now, and they've got the control wards on the map, this allows you to get more vision down in places you might be afraid of. You know, like, imagine you're playing bot lane 2-on-2, and you shove up the minion wave, and then, you know, okay, you got to retreat because you push into the turret, it's going to reset. You can, like, summon your Ghost Poro in that front brush, so you can help track to see if, like, the jungler is coming to join them. A lot of people will forget that Ghost Poro exists, and they might track into that brush and get spotted or something. I don't know. The more I think about it, the more it's hard for me to really find great uses of Ghost Poro, and I'm just not as in love with it. Maybe I'm totally wrong, and you guys have great use cases here. Eyeball Collector is super sick on ARAM because why would you pick anything else in that mode? When you fully stack it, it's worth 30 ability power or 18 attack damage. That is a lot of stats. That is like 700 gold of stats. Yeah, okay, 650. It is a lot of gold of stats. It is a lot. It takes a long time to get there. I mean, to be clear, getting to 10 kills or assists is going to take you quite some time. In ARAM, it's free. Again, this is insane in ARAM, but that's not everything that matters. But basically, even though, like, I super love Zombie Ward, I think Eyeball Collection is really, really nice on Meiji supports, because getting 30 ability power on Sona or Soraka or Nami or Karma, where they don't have access to a lot of AP, is a really big deal. Because keep in mind, these are champions that are buying healing and shielding power. So they've got like 20 to 30% bonuses to all their AP ratios. So that Karma Shield with a 0.6 AP ratio, that's, I don't know if that's the exact number, becomes a 0.78 AP ratio, which is really high. It's really high. And you get 30 ability power on that 0.78 AP ratio, so your shields just, like, are 23 points more shielding. That's a lot, and all your poke does 20 more damage. Like, that's really good. And because you're playing, you know, this Eyeball Collector support who's getting control wards and getting a red sweeper and all this other stuff, and you're hopefully getting into kills and assists, like 3 assists and what, 14 ward takedowns, okay, that's kind of high. Fine, 5 assists and 10 ward kills, that seems pretty reasonable. That's online about like 15 minutes. Like, that's more stats than Gathering Storm every time. I think Gathering Storm has to trigger twice and it's at 24. Like, this is literally better than Gathering Storm until 30 minutes in basically all cases. So if you're ever, like, wondering, like, for a secondary to walk into to get more power and get more AP, it's like, well, unless you really want all the other things in sorcery, I mean, it's certainly not Gathering Storm if you're a support, because Eyeball Collection is just going to be more stats for most of the game. So I think this is super, super, super good if you really want stats somewhere. And what's nice is it's kind of easy to trigger in all cases. I don't think you should really ever go Eyeball Collection on top lane, because getting into kills and assists is hard. You're often on an island. You're never running sweeper. You're not killing wards very often, which is why I think if you're playing top lane at all, Zombie Ward is like the automatic choice here. I think this is frequently the best choice for support, though I think it can be debatable. But yeah, that's the rundown here. And then finally, you get down here to the various hunters. So Ravenous Hunter is Spell Vamp up to 15% based on kills and assists. Ingenious Hunter is up to 40% active item CDR, I believe, based on kills and assists. And Relentless Hunter is up to 48 out of combat movement speed based on kills or assists. So we talked about some of this stuff already. If you're going Domination Secondary as a support, I think Eyeball Collection is an automatic. And then probably Taste of Blood more than anything else. I think, if you're going to do this at all. But you could also choose to go for active item CDR. And this is, I think, really where support can shine. Because we talked about going for, Redemption or Lockout or Face the Mountain. All these things that, can give you shield and heal power or scale with shield and heal power. Ingenious Hunter gives you active item CDR for those actives. And I think it's completely reasonable to do Eyeball Collection Ingenious Hunter as your splash on support. Because getting Redemption reduced by 40% of its cooldown is a pretty big deal. Now, this requires you get a kill or assist on each individual opponent, all 5 of them, but it starts at 10%, right? And getting the first one's not too hard. You should probably have kill resist on 2 to 3 players by the time you even, buy a Redemption, which means it's going to sit at 22 or 28% active item CDR from the very beginning. And as it reads here in the tooltip, it does include trinkets, which means just at the very beginning of the game, your yellow trinket is 10% CDR on it. You go over to, buy your red trinket or whatever, and that's been dropped by 20% as well once you got your sight stone and everything else. And there's really some very significant boosts here. And what's really cute is Ingenious Hunter feeds into Eyeball Collection because your sweeper is off cooldown more often to sweep wards away. There's some really, really nice synergies here available to you as a support. It's really, really nice. I really want to sell this up quite a bit. Now, of course, this is completely battling against Relentless Hunter for another thing the supports want, which is up to 48 out of combat movement speed. And now, based on doing some quick maths, 2 plus 2 is 4, minus 1 is 3, but there's 80 out of combat movement speed on Boots of Mobility, so it doesn't really catch you up to Moby Boots, but that's okay. It's still a lot of out of combat movement speed. And it, can maybe allow you to go for a more combat oriented boot option like Lucidity Boots or something. Although I still feel like it's really hard for me to not go Ingenious Hunter all the time. I think Relentless Hunter is very good on Assassins. I think if you're trying to get into ganks, getting the extra, we'll say 16, 24, 32, something around there is going to be a more expected movement speed boost. But if you're in the 30s area, you're at 8 to 10% out of combat move speed, which is pretty reasonable, getting 8 to 10%. I think if you're going to compare apples to apples, Relentless Hunter can almost never be as good as Celerity. Celerity is 4% move speed all the time, and Relentless Hunter is 4% move speed. Let's see, if you have 350 base move speed, 1% is 3.5, so 2% is 7. Right, so there's the math. So 4% out of 4% move speed at 350 is 14. If I'm not doing my math wrong, if I'm doing my math wrong, I apologize. But that means you have to get 2 stacks of Relentless Hunter just to have the movement speed out of combat be as good as Celerity. And that's not counting the fact that it works in combat and does other things. So if you're trying to find ways to move fast, it's not here. Celerity is better than Relentless Hunter. I think this actually might just be an undertuned rune right now. But maybe I'm wrong and I'm totally missing something that's actually super viable. But the numbers kind of seem low. But what's nice is, at the same time, if you're already going Domination, Relentless Hunter is always useful. At the very least, you walk to your lane faster. If you're playing top lane, whatever, and you've got your Taste of Blood to stay in lane a bit more, and you've got your zombie wards to stay alive a bit longer, then it's oh, I have Relentless Hunter. And what's nice is this not only gets you to lane faster, but it also allows you to dodge ganks if you see them coming because they kill your zombie ward, but you've got that 16 move speed extra to walk away. It's not insane, but sometimes it's life or death. Sometimes it matters. Sometimes it makes a difference. Not all the time, but it can. And also if you're a jungler, right? Generally speaking, junglers are very healthy in the jungle, and they don't really need Ravenous Hunter to keep themselves alive to do it, and most junglers don't have a lot of active items, right? You think of Proto Belt and Zonias and Hextech GLP and Gunblade, and it's how many of those are you really buying in almost any jungle role? But Relentless Hunter lets you walk through their wards and get on them a bit quicker. And one thing I do want to point out one more time about movement speed is differences in 5 to 10 move speed can actually mean a whole lot, because as long as you're faster than them, you will catch up to them, right? If you're both at 350, but you're instead at 360 or 366, you're not catching up to them. 16 move speed might not feel like a lot, but if you can actually close the gap, or they can actually start running away from you because they have the move speed, if you're the one who's being hunted in this case and have this mastery or this rune, it can matter. But really, the more I look at this, it's like hard for me to convince myself that's a really good, really, really good rune. That said, statistically, it does have some pretty good users. And again, they tend to be people who just want to get in combat to make things happen. I can see this being a really good Thresh rune, right? To get Thresh into those picks, to get him there, to allow him to find that hook, or to allow Janna to roam around to the rest of the team or something else. And if you are going to run a sorcery domination duo, Relentless Hunter will multiply celerity. And it will stack with water walking to give you a lot of extra movement speed to, give you more ability power, or just to zip around the river and never be caught. And at a certain point, stacking move speed can be really valuable, and there can be a case made for this rune. Revenant Hunter, of course, is just a very generically solid rune on things that aren't marksman. It's Spell Vamp. Spell Vamp solid. It goes up to 15% at the end of the game. It is 1/3 effect for AoE abilities, which means it's 5% Spell Vamp on like an Echo Q at max stack, which, hey, can still be decent. Again, if you're playing ARAM, we go back to this one, and you're playing Echo or Karthus or whatever, and you've gone Domination Primary, you're getting 5% lifesteal on all your damage against minions, against champions, all the stuff. It's reasonable. And I don't really know the really big Spell Vamp users in League of Legends. I didn't do a ton of research on like insane Revenant Hunter users. But, theoretically, I could see like it being decent on Vladimir or any other like sort of spell bruiser. Nautilus probably does too little damage for it to matter. But, if you are a spell-based juggernaut, I can see this being maybe reasonable on even like a Mordekaiser, just because you're going to be just churning through spells a lot and getting health back. I'm not really sure, but at the same time, maybe Mordekaiser wants Ingenious Hunter for the Gunblade active and maybe the Proto Belt that he might buy at a certain point. I don't know. This is generically fine. I think this is one of the more underwhelming slots. Again, if you just compare Relentless Hunter to Celerity, it's really obvious that it's weaker in most cases. I also think Celerity is overpowered by a lot, and then it eventually will get nerfed. It got buffed like at the very end of PvE, but it's super, super, super good. Either way, I don't know. Not a lot to say about this, I feel. But what it comes down to is right now I just feel like Dark Harvest is slightly undertuned. Predator is not performing well statistically, but I think that's more people are misplaying. And Electrocute really is only good on champions that really, really feel like they should be good on Electrocute. I've seen a lot of people take Electrocute on bad champions, like they're running it on like Teemo or like a Misfortune or Ashe, and it's just like, no, you don't really want that. Like, you'd rather just take press the attack if that's going to be happening in the first place. If the way you're triggering Electrocute is auto attacks, just run press the attack, right? And right now, just also Aerie is overtuned, so a lot of champions that would do well with Electrocute are getting just stymied by the fact that Aerie exists, and that makes it hard. I think there's a good breadth of options here across these things. Again, Cheapshot really needs a follow-up bit of damage, but the cooldown is super short. And even though the damage doesn't look super high, it is true damage. The cooldown is short. It does matter in your fights. It really is quite nice. Taste of Blood, I think, is super underrated and really worth considering for the sustained power. And obviously Sudden Impact is good on a lot of Leaping Assassins and the Rivens and such of the world. Zombie Ward, super sick on top lane. Hard to find a case for Ghost Poro. Eyeball Collector, I think, is really, really good and probably best in slot on support if you can get yourself into Domination, and then supports can go run Ingenious Hunter, which feels really slick as well, and that's all pretty sexy. So that's my rundown of the Domination tree. Thanks everyone for watching. I will be back maybe tomorrow with the next tree down, which is probably Sorcery. It is, so that'll be in hopefully in the near future. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.